probably around 4:15, if there are members who would like of the public who would like to address this committee. On that note, I do ask that if you're a member of the subcommittee or one of our panelists and you're in a place where it is safe and comfortable to do so, we'd love to have you on camera. If not, we certainly respect that. And if you're a member of the public, we would ask that you leave your camera off until it is time for public comment. Two other just administrative norms that we ask. One, we ask everybody to avoid using the chat. It can be generally distracting for all participants, and particularly so for anyone using a screen reader or other similar technologies. And finally, I will ask that the first time you speak, you give a full introduction of yourself, and anytime you speak, you just state your name so everyone knows who is talking. Today's conversation is going to be primarily consumed learning from and hearing and engaging with a really great panel of folks to talk about a lot of the things this subcommittee has identified. Everything from barriers to accessing some of the outdoors, to some of the cool programs going on to break through some of those barriers, to get perspectives from across the state and all types of different recreation. Carrie has been working frantically for the last few months to assemble these panels, and I am really excited about the group she's assembled today. We will also go over a couple of administrative items. I want to thank all of our subcommittee members. We asked you last fall when they were recruiting for this task force to volunteer 60, 90 minutes once a month. As I have highlighted, it's going to take a little bit more time than that. We've highlighted and uncovered these are some really complex issues to get right. So I know our subcommittee members have responded to Carrie's poll she sent out about adding some additional meetings this summer to make sure we get through the work, as well as looking at some time in July or possibly August to get together in person. Just to remind everyone where we are in this process, we're required to submit our recommendations to the task force itself by the end of the year, by December 1st. We're actually working to get ahead of that. Those of you who have dealt with the legislative process know that legislative business starts to happen around September or October. So our goal over the summer is to start developing a lot of the ideas that you have surfaced so far into proposals or recommendations, to share those with the general public and get reaction, and to be on track to have the framework of a set of recommendations for tearing through some of these barriers and finding ways past them by late fall. So for anyone who's a panelist, I will ask you now, I will ask you at the end of the call, and Carrie will probably follow up with you. This group is going to be putting together every month over the next 3 or 4 months a handful of ideas, not necessarily firm recommendations, but here's some ideas based on what we've learned and what we've been talking about that we think might be part of the solution. And we want to get those out to as wide an audience as possible. So we'll be using the Engage Dora website. We'll send that around. And we'd love everyone's help in getting those ideas out and to as many people as you know. With that, I'd like to start bringing in our panel because it is such an impressive group. What we will most likely be doing is I'm going to ask each of them to do some introductions after I have our members themselves introduce one another. I'll ask 1 or 2 questions, but I really want this to be the members of this subcommittee talking with our panelists. So what I'd like to do is start with members of the subcommittee. And John, I'm going to go to you first and then to Kurt to introduce yourself, where you come into this conversation and what's on your mind as we engage with this panel. So let's go to John and then Kurt.
Hi guys, I'm John Broadbent. I'm an attorney with a firm in Denver. I live in Denver. I'm involved in various different activities regarding outdoor access at this moment, and this is one of them, and I'm very proud to be here.
Thanks, John. Curtis and then Sharon.
Hi, I'm Kurt Garrett. I am the Disaster Preparedness Coordinator at Atlantis Community Center for Independent Living. Formerly 27 years working for Denver Parks and Recreation youth programs, and a 3rd-generation native Coloradan.
Thank you, sir. Sharon and then Connor, please.
I'm Sharon Campbell. I'm a C4, C5 spinal cord injury patient. 10 years lived experience, so I just kind of enjoy participating, giving feedback, trying to help where I can, and that's what drew me to outdoor rec and this subcommittee.
Thank you, Sharon. Connor, you want to say hello?
Hey everyone, Connor Hall. I lead Colorado's Office of Outdoor Recreation and Industry. One of our main focus areas is trying to provide more equitable access to the outdoor experience. And I also serve on the Colorado Outdoor Equity Fund board. Really great to be here.
Thank you, Connor. And for those who aren't aware, this task force is structured as there's an executive committee that kind of sits as an umbrella, and then there are these 4 subcommittees. This one looking at outdoor recreation. We have another one looking at rewriting Colorado's anti-discrimination laws, one looking at things like accessing government services, everything from running for and serving in office to things like working for the government. And then we have another one looking specifically at housing. So we've got the subcommittee members. We have a member of the executive committee here. So Mr. Stone, I would love for you to say hello to everyone if you'd like.
Thank you, Barrick. Thank you, Carrie. Michael Stone here, up in Boulder, Colorado. As Barrick said, a member of the executive committee, the task force executive committee. Also, another person who brings a lived experience, being also a member of from our blind community. You never know where to start, but just in the spirit of time, I want to thank everyone. Starting with our subcommittee. I really cannot thank you enough for your time. As Barrick mentioned, things are going to take a little bit longer. And in that spirit, and something that's going to come up, it's going to be a little bit of a theme amongst all our subcommittees, but one that you guys, in fact, are going to be challenged with is to consider, as we think about access, think about the concept of enforcement. And it's one of the things that sort of is giving us great challenge as we move forward. The whole concept of everything that we had is that the notion of ADA was a great floor. It was a great start. We're taking it up several levels with this, and we have the opportunity to make history. And it's wonderful that you're a part of this. And again, my most sincere gratitude. Love our panel today. One of those members has the very distinct misfortune of being a close personal friend, and that would be Topher. And although I'm very much looking forward to hearing everything he has to say, I'm sorry I won't be able to stay for the whole meeting. But really want to thank you very, very much. It really is a privilege to work with you all. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Michael. The last thing I do want to mention, I'm not going to call them onto camera, but we do have several members of the Colorado Civil Rights Division, the Lieutenant Governor, who I don't believe has missed any of the subcommittee or committee meetings, as well as her senior policy advisor, Josh Winkler. There's a lot of interest. And as I said, we also have folks watching the YouTube stream. But with that, it's going to be time for me to talk less and listen a lot more. So, Carrie, I'm going to start calling members of our panel. And panelists, as I call you in up, we'd love for you to just introduce yourself, what it is you do that's connected to the conversations, or what your point of entry is into this discussion. And I'm going to go first to Jeffrey and then to Ryan.
All right, I'm assuming that's me, and there's no other Jeffreys in here. I am Jeffrey Lockwood. I'm the founder and executive director, toilet cleaner of the Lockwood Foundation. I wear a lot of hats. Our organization is sort of built on this idea that community can help stretch the very fabric of the boundaries that keep us all from the outdoors, regardless of experience or ability. Our sort of, or our organization's claim to fame was we actually helped the first, third, fourth, and fifth wheelchair user summit Mount Elbert. So in terms of stretching those boundaries to the top of Colorado and shattering them year after year with good weather, of course, that's sort of the space that our community has been working in. And we are managing about 1,000 volunteers throughout the state that are pushing those boundaries to their what we are considering their limits, but we know it can go a lot further. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeffrey. Ryan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Asala, and I'm based out of Ridgeway State Park, and I work for CPW as a program coordinator. I, too, wear a lot of hats and things other than accessibility, but I also manage our Ridgeway local state park accessibility programs. And our goal is to kind of build those programs to be sort of like a beacon in the Western Slope and be a place for so we can improve our accessibility for all people to come enjoy our park and then other parks and be a model for other parks around the state. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to go to Chris and then Topher.
Thanks, everybody, and for having me here. My name is Chris Ewen Farrell. Go by he, him pronouns. I'm with an organization called Great Outdoors Colorado. We did prepare a slide deck. I'm told we have to call it a slide deck now, otherwise you give away your age if you call it a PowerPoint. So I won't get into details about GoCo itself, but as director of programs, sometimes that means cleaning toilets, Jeffrey. Other times it means working with partners to help advance outdoor recreation and conservation in the state. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris. Let's go to Topher and then Wendy, please.
Hello, I'm Topher Downham with the City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks. My official title is Education and Outreach Program Manager for Accessibility. Really long name of an organization, a really long title. We up here at Boulder like long things, titles and names. But basically I've been here for 28 years now, a few years as a volunteer beforehand, trying to get our trails more accessible to begin with, and then got into leading programs for people with disabilities. We call it roll and strolls, getting people out. And then now we have adaptive mountain bikes that we're taking people out on. And yeah, just generally trying to make things more accessible. And one last thing we do is a lot of experiential wheelchair hikes, and we use low vision glasses just to give that experience to people without disabilities so that they have a better understanding of what we're dealing with. And so I invite you all to come up to Boulder and do that sometime.
Thank you, Topher. Appreciate that. Wendy and then Tim, please.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Wendy Padilla. I'm the COO for the Department of Natural Resources and have been here about 22 years. And the connection is really near and dear to my heart. A long time ago at CPW, I was the ADA coordinator and got to have a lot of great conversations with folks. And we want information on this to be as easy to find as possible. We want to have our facilities and trails and properties as accessible as possible and empower our employees to take care of any issues at the lowest level. And really, I love what you said, Michael, about enforcement. We want to change the systems. We want to change the processes so that it's not up to individual interpretation or individual employee knowledge, but really it's baked into our systems so that we can just get these problems solved. We have an amazing amount of programs like Ryan's at Ridgeway, but a lot of our state parks and a lot of hunts and fishing trips that are for people with disabilities, and we really want people to go outside and be as independent as they want to be, really anywhere outdoors, but definitely on our DNR properties.
Thank you, Wendy. Tim and Tilla, please.
Hi, I'm Tim Burr. I run the Return to Dirt program, which is a program underneath the High Fives Foundation. I started Return to Dirt as an independent nonprofit back in 2018. And our mission is to use adapted off-road vehicles to access the backcountry with people that have all manner of different disabilities. And then in 2022, we became a part of the High Fives Foundation as a way to, exponentially grow, bring our program to more people. I'm based in Glenwood Springs. And so a lot of our trips are based out of this area, and we spend a lot of time in the Roaring Fork Valley backcountry, using our vehicles, specifically side-by-sides. Maybe you're familiar, maybe you're not. They're the most capable, easiest adapted vehicle that we have figured out, and that has led us to be one of the more inclusive adaptive sports to be done because of how low the physical barrier to entry is. For instance, this past Sunday was our first what I call the dirt trip of the season, and we took a C2 quadriplegic out, C2 complete. So that means that he runs his power wheelchair with a sip and puff, and essentially only has control of his neck muscles. And I was able to drive him. I'm a C5 quad myself, but our system makes it so I can drive. And we returned him to the Grand Junction Desert and did a lot of really exciting things that C2 quads don't get to see, from his perspective and from mine. So yeah, really proud to be here and excited to work with all of you.
Very cool program. Look forward to talking more about it, Tim. Tilla.
Okay. Good afternoon, Tila Larson with Great Outdoors Colorado. I'm accompanying CYF to share a little bit more about GoCo, perspectives of our partners and our investments across the state.
Awesome. Thank you, Tila. As I said at the top, I really want this to focus on questions from our members. I'm just going to kind of prime the conversation with one, maybe two questions. My first question I'm going to ask, and I will give some more background, frankly, to give everyone an opportunity to think about your answer. But I want to ask everyone first, what is a simple or one of the lower hanging fruits, something you've seen make a difference in breaking through some barriers to accessibility, that with the right resources, the right commitment, you could see being applied in some other places? And so all of you know, this group has been looking at the full spectrum and continuum of access. From the moment someone leaves home and tries to get transported to the point of recreation, to things like parking, to getting through gates, to even the information about what different trails, lakes, or opportunities are accessible and to what extent, to things like access to adaptive equipment and transportation to get there. So we're looking at all of that full spectrum of barriers and how can we create truly equitable access. And I'd love to hear some examples. We want to think boldly. We're going to think big, but I also would love to hear what are some of the simple, the more obvious ones. And Jeffrey, I see your hand up first, so I'm going to go to you first, and then I'm going to go around the horns. I'll go to Jeffrey and then to Ryan.
Well, I missed out on an opportunity to say that I do volunteer for Topher at Boulder OSMP's adaptive mountain biking program, whether he likes it or not for now. And then I also volunteer at Ignite Adaptive Sports, so I'm a bi-ski instructor there. I do have an answer for this question, and I think at least off the cuff, the easiest low-hanging fruit that I kind of notice within different programs as a barrier is parking itself. There's this concept that, like, if this isn't an accessible trail, why should there be accessible hiking? Or why should there be accessible parking if this trail is not accessible? And the reality is as humans, like, the one thing that we really do well is adapt. And so to not give an individual or their community the ability to adapt because the parking isn't there at the beginning of the trailhead before the trail even starts, I think is a low-hanging fruit. And then there's this concept of like, well, we have one accessible space and it's not an accessible trail. Isn't that good enough? And the answer is overwhelmingly no. I don't know what the right number is. I think that's above my pay grade, but I see it in so many different programs. We've gone out to state parks. There's a lot of accommodation at state parks, but it's one of the few places where we find there is enough space created for our community to support one another in accessing those trails. So I think parking, restrooms, and the accessibility once you get to a location before you actually hit the trail is crucial. That's my low-hanging fruit. Thank you.
Love it. Thanks, Jeffrey. Let's go to Ryan and then Chris.
And kind of slowly working in this field and getting the perspectives from a lot of these fine people in this room and in other places. I think one of the low-hanging fruits I've seen is really just knowledge about what's available to a person who needs accessibility, whether it's in the form of learning that a trail is accessible and how to get there and the knowledge base to do so. So, whether that's web development, app development, things that are, create a more broad spectrum knowledge base of things that are accessible and ratings of how accessible they are. I think that's a low-hanging fruit as well. It's just providing the knowledge of what's available to people.
Thanks, Ryan. Chris, and then Tila.
Great. And maybe we'll just combine ours since we're
That's fine.
operating from a similar perspective. Yeah, as a funder, it seems like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. I'm trying to think of specific examples. I just got invited. I can't participate, but I got invited to go out and scout some new trails being developed in Clear Creek County for the Virginia Canyon Mountain Park. So in those instances where we're building new infrastructure, that seems like really low-hanging fruit. You know, why not make it more accessible? And we've seen a few instances of that. I think down at Fisher's Peak State Park, Windy, a lot of those trails and concepts around trails were thoughtful about how to, you know, make trails at least or aspects of that more accessible. And then Tila, you looked at some of the other examples that we've had recently.
Yeah, I would say another, I think it's a low-hanging fruit. I think some of our partners on the ground would say it's a little bit more of a barrier for them, but truly engaging the community when doing those projects, right? And purposefully going out and going beyond your traditional public processes to reach out to folks that you are trying to serve and seek intentional feedback about how to design and create better spaces. And I think the more that we create awareness that that's an expectation in a planning process and really encourage, and it goes back to, again, providing those knowledge, the resources, how to do it for those partners, so that it is a really thoughtful design when putting those projects on the ground.
Thank you, Tila. Let me go to Topher and then Windy.
All right. Excuse me. A lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been picked, so I'm going to jump up a little bit. And just kind of to follow Tila with creating community and understanding and stuff. One of the problems with having a disability is we were kind of deputized to be the ones that complain about everything and try to push the accessibility issue. One thing that would really help is just having allies and like everybody here without a disability speaking up when they see something that needs to be fixed, or if they see somebody with a disability that might need some help, offering up some assistance. But yeah, basically we need allies. That's my first piece of low-hanging fruit. And then the other idea that I have that we're doing with open space and mountain parks now is we've created a kind of a subcommittee of accessibility. So we got somebody from trails, we got somebody from programming, we got somebody from human dimensions. And whenever there's a new project coming up, we try to address that stuff and like, can we make this accessible? Can we make this better? So yeah, that not exactly low-hanging fruit, but pretty low and pretty easy to do, pretty easy to set up.
Thanks, Topher.
You bet.
Windy, what's a simple solution you've seen out there that you think could be scaled or easily grabbed onto?
I think it goes back to the systems. Governments are really hard ships to turn around. And so if you write a policy or put a system in place, it's hard to change it. So let's write the correct policies. One of the things that the state has done really well on is there's now a central pot of money for any money that needs to be made for accommodation. So just making it easy for all of our employees to just do the right thing is, to me, the simplest thing that I can empower.
Thank you, Windy. Members of the subcommittee, start thinking of your questions because I'm going to ask one more and then I'm really going to hand the floor to our members. I want to shift gears completely away from the easy stuff, the small stuff, and start thinking about the big things. And when I say big, we've talked about the ADA being the floor, not the ceiling in Colorado. And we know that anything this subcommittee recommends, it's not like somebody after the fact is going to say, let's be even more bold. So it's our job to be as aspirational as possible. But when I say that, maybe that's a multi-million-dollar program. Maybe to Topher's point, that's a whole lot more public awareness and who the allies are. So my next question, and Topher, I'm going to go to you first and then to Tila, is if you could wave the wand and accomplish one big thing to make a real difference in the accessibility of recreation to Coloradans with disabilities, what would you swing for?
That's a good question. I actually think I'd swing for getting everybody in the hierarchy, like all the way up from municipal to state to federal to international, and everybody within, like, directors and everything, to be on board with accessibility, to be thinking about that the whole time when they're making decisions. Because I feel like a lot of times right now, at the lower level, we get a great idea and they'll miss the stuff up a few levels. They'll be like, oh yeah, we didn't think about making that trail accessible. We just want mountain bikers on that. Oh right, there's mountain bikers that need it 4 feet wide because they have the adaptive mountain bikes. And along with that Wanda, I would like to make everybody aware that accessibility brings a lot of money in. It has more of an economic impact than mountain bikers. So yeah, I'd love to get that. The people that are trying to make money for the state and for the federal government, yeah, let's bring in some money from the people with disabilities.
Thank you, Topher.
You bet.
Tila, and then Wendy, please.
So if I were swinging big, I'd ask for all the resources, and I'd say everything from not making it an unfunded mandate, right? Providing folks with an opportunity to put these really great projects on the ground, combined with the resources of knowledge and expertise. What I've seen a lot of our partners struggle with from small communities in particular is a one-man shop just trying to do basic infrastructure in the community, and they need support. They need to know where to go. I think everybody has the intention of wanting to do what is right, but they need help in getting there. And so the more that they have the knowledge and understanding, guidance about how to get there, and then again, you combine it with pot of funding to do so, you can get a lot of great things done.
Thank you, Tila. Wendy, from the awareness to the big program and the unicorn, if you could wave the wand and really make a difference, what would you want to tackle?
This is really bureaucratic, but I would love to have anybody who needs to fill out paperwork to get a free pass or license or benefits from a government entity to have to fill out one piece of paperwork and have it apply to all the state benefits that they're entitled to, rather than filling out 14 forms.
You want government efficiency. You are swinging for the home run.
Yes.
We'll go after it though. Let me get Jeffrey and then Ryan in.
All right, my gears are turning. When we think about small money or moderate size money, a lot of times the space is creating parking spaces, renovating trails, making them wider, more accessible, more adaptable. But unlimited money or near unlimited money, that next few tiers up, I would say rather than piecemealing projects and we have to do these things that we're doing now in small bite-sized portions because they're expensive. But if we had unlimited funds, I would say we start investing in spaces like we do inaccessible and adaptable spaces like we do the rest of our mountain parks. How much money goes into creating spaces for recreation? Even if you take ski resorts out of the picture, it's billions and billions of dollars. And if we built spaces that were from the ground up accessible and even adaptable in the spaces that we want them to be, that would be where I would wave my magic wand. Let's start creating Disneylands in Colorado for everyone to experience, regardless of ability or experience. And let's do it from the ground up. Let's not renovate a ski resort to make 1% of it accessible. Let's build a space for all of us. That's magic wand thinking, but I don't think it's that crazy actually. And we'll do it in the next 5 or 10 years. So if you need a model, come back to us.
I love the thinking, and I love the combination, as several of our panelists have noted. It's the right thing to do, it's the cool thing to do, and it can be a profitable thing to do given this market. But I love that idea from the ground up, building it. Let me get Ryan and then Chris in.
Kind of to follow up with what Jeffrey said, but also, I think if I was to swing for the fences, coming from the perspective of a state park system. Specifically our park and a lot of the parks were kind of built with ADA in mind and have very good access. However, that was aging infrastructure and aging requirements and things that we've realized probably aren't up to date and the most accessible now. So I would swing for the fences as to set a higher standard or a higher floor when it comes to trail building and trail reconstruction in all our state parks. So that, because they're perfect entities with perfect structure to remodel or redesign the trail systems to a point where they're fully accessible. That's what I would go for.
Yeah. Chris.
It's hard to go last after everybody has such good ideas. I will say, I mean, we're taking a swing to Topher's point. We're taking a swing at some of this statewide planning work, so that and to Jeffrey's point too, we have these regional partnerships really set up to be thinking on the front end about how do we build and develop accessible parks and accessible outdoor recreation amenities. So that at least moving forward, we have that kind of thought process in mind, that it's not just about, one unique user group. It should be benefiting a much broader user group across the state. I guess if I had my magic wand, I would have to tie it to some new funding source or additional funding source, because all of this, even baseline maintenance takes up so much funding. So when we talk about adding to that new amenities, that funding's got to come from somewhere. So yeah, plant trees that make money, I guess, is my big idea, which is, as often is the case, not actionable.
Tim, you are back with us.
I am back. Yeah, sorry.
No, not at all.
This is life in the mountains. Sometimes your Wi-Fi just drops. Yeah, I didn't catch the prompt, but I'm assuming it's magic wand, big idea stuff.
You got it.
Okay, cool. My answer to that is I would like to wave the magic wand and have recreation areas be available and accessible to everybody, like we've all said, but the magic would be that everybody plays nice together, and throughout all of the modalities are shared space, super respectful and super responsible, being that with the ski industry, there's not actual there's no competition on the runs that are available for skiers or for snowboarders, right? And I think that is an impressive thing in a lot of ways, that like skiers and snowboarders are tribal to like an acceptable amount, which is, it's just like cute. And I think that should be the way that it is with all outdoor recreation. I'd like to see, I've been a part of every type of recreation that you can think of prior to becoming quadriplegic and post. And a lot of times I have friends in different modalities that are not cool with the other ones. And I think that if I could wave a magic wand, I would change that.
I appreciate this. And I know this seems like one of these big out there questions, but it's the kind of things that this group has been saying, we want to think big and set that as the North Star and make some steps along the way, but that's not mean we don't go for the big ideas. One of our members joined just a few minutes late, Jen Mendenhall. I know you were running around picking something up for your daughter. Are you in a place where you want to come off mute and introduce yourself to our panel? And if not, totally okay, I will get back to you. Subcommittee members, this is where this really becomes your call, your show. I would love for you guys, raise your hand using the little emoticon or just wave at me and come off mute. What questions do you have? And feel free to ask questions to the full panel or to specific members. and know that you can either volunteer or get voluntold into this conversation. So who wants to lean in first? Sharon, jump in, please.
I figured I'd go ahead and run my mouth first. I had some questions for Jeffrey actually, because I do agree the point of entry is one of the big things. I've seen you all complete some 14ers and things like that, and the trip distance simply from parking to a trailhead is about the max distance that I can cover. Once actually out on the trail, if there was closer parking and bathrooms, then I could actually participate in at least some of the outdoors within, you know, a mile to 2 mile radius. The harder portion becomes when you get deeper into the mountains and enjoying more of the trails away from that parking lot. What have you guys seen that would help someone enjoy something like a 14er or getting deeper into the mountains, whether that's equipment, programs, volunteer, or just numbers of getting people there? What have you seen that's really beneficial for getting people outdoors further than just the nearby trailhead?
Jeffrey, I'm seeing you smile, but you're still on mute. So come up mute
I'm
and get
here.
in here on this one.
That is a phenomenal question. And I think for our community, it's two things. It is the technology. Technology is always evolving and innovating, and it allows us all to get back into the backcountry further into the mountains. And, you know, we all adapt in different ways. Has anybody skied barefoot before? You know, not many. So we all adapt in our own ways. And if we can advance that technology, skis as the example here, we ski better, we float, we go faster, we turn better. I mean, these are the things that allow us to get further. So I think technology is really a big thing. You know, we've been playing in the space of working with universities to better improve some of these models that we already use, because this device, it does not accommodate everybody, the majority of our community, or it lacks suspension, or it's not as durable as we'd like it to be, or it just doesn't go to the places we want it to go. And that allows our whole community to go to those places. So technology is key, in finding ways to invest in the development of technology one way or another. It has to keep growing. And unfortunately, I think that industry is a little bit less public than I'd like it to be, and a little bit more for profit, unfortunately. So you see these extraordinary prices and only evolution as periodically, as opposed to regularly. So technology is one, and then the opportunity for communities to get together and go to those places. I mean, we are completely contingent on our community strength. So without the opportunity for the tribe, if you will, to rally together and to help push, pull, and even carry our trail chairs that facilitate those adaptive opportunities, we can't break through those barriers. And we are, you know, we're 5 miles down the accessible trail into the very difficult trail, and then we're lifting our community members up mountains over the rocks. So, I mean, we are really pushing those boundaries to the level of like, this is where we feel safe in the extreme. So facilitating community engagement, allowing people to gather, and as well as, you know, having the technology that can get one out there. Volunteering for Topher's program in Boulder has completely revolutionized the way I look at trail access. You know, what we do in single track at TLF is very different from what we do in Boulder with adaptive mountain biking program. But that is such a different experience. One is so independent, and the other is so community oriented. And they're just different ways to experience the outdoors. And ideally, those things are always together. But we have to evolve the community space and the technological space in order to get deeper in the mountains, in order to stretch the boundaries of where we can all go together.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm not going to be able to get to every one of our panelists because I want to get some more questions. In just a minute, I'm going to go to Curtis and then Melanie and then Connor. But before I do, are there any other of our panelists that do want to lean in on Sharon's question about things you've seen that help some of the adaptive athletes get further up the summit, get deeper in? Topher, jump in.
I'm just going to add on what Jeffrey just said about technology. It's huge. Just a couple of good examples. This weekend, we did a program at Adaptive Mountain Bike Clinic, and we got a quadriplegic C7 out on a bike, and we thought we had the power assist on, and something was messed up, and he ended up like going about a quarter of a mile, coming back, going another quarter of a mile, and I'm right there with him, and he's like, I'm exhausted. I got to turn around now. And I was like, well, just hang with me for another like 100 yards, and we'll try to get this worked out. And we started going, and I had somebody like get his throttle button working, and I'm like, all right, hold on to this, and we start going, and he has the throttle on, and instead of stopping at that 100 yards, he ended up going like 2 miles around the loop and coming back, and I couldn't even keep up with him. And so just, I mean, watching that happen, like with somebody that was new to the whole sport, and it's like, yeah, technology is like changing it for us. And he got to do it by himself. Nobody was helping him. He stayed on the trail, and those are the things that I'm finding are the best. We can do a whole hike now with other people and still have energy to have a beer afterwards. I mean, that's huge. I used to have to go home for a nap after like a 2 mile ride, but now I can go 16 miles and have that energy to hang out with the community afterwards. So kind of to Tim's point too.
I love that example, Topher. I think it's reasonable we can come up with some recommendations on equipment and technology. I don't know what they'll say to me if my recommendations include beers after that, but we'll have the conversation. Sharon, I'm going to bring in the next person with a question. Panelists, I think in general, because now I'm seeing every one of our committee members has questions. So I'm in general going to ask for about 2 panelists to lean in on each of these. Curtis, let me get you in next, and then I'll go to Melanie.
So my question's something we really haven't talked about yet in here. Transportation. How are I say are individuals getting to your programs with their own vehicles, adaptive vehicles, modes of transportation, like Tim, how do people get from Grand Junction to you in Glenwood? Especially if they don't have their own vehicle, or, Jeffrey, what if down here in Denver, what if we want to come see you, but I don't have an accessible van. I don't have any vehicle, but I need something accessible.
I can answer that question a little bit. So for instance, this past weekend, we were actually in Grand Junction doing the trip, for the sake of it's actually actively hailing right now. But our 2 athletes that came out to drive with us were they live in Denver. And so they had their own vehicles. They were able to get themselves out to ride with us. And at this point, we find that that's a main barrier is people getting to the zones that we're going to go to. And we have started partnering with a adaptive driving company that has vehicles that they sell as a dealership, but then they also adapt vehicles, called United Access. And so our partnership with them includes offering vehicles to those that don't have them. So conceivably, starting this summer, we'll be able to invite people that could be coming from, realistically anywhere, because we see people traveling from all over the world to come and do our program. They could fly into Denver, and then we could have United Access drop off a wheelchair ramp van at DIA for them to then get to us. So it's a great question. It's a real problem to deal with. And for right now, we're heading that direction by way of adaptive mobility dealership van rentals, essentially.
Thanks, Tim. Jeffrey, jump in. What are your thoughts on tackling this transportation issue?
I am so excited to talk about one of my biggest frustrations. You talk about Mount Elbert and like these impossible peaks and like breaking through those barriers. And it's like, we've got it. We're doing it. We've been scaling for 5 years. And then I get the emails of, I can't get there alone. There's 0 options. And that disproportionate population of like, if you have your own vehicle, if you have friends or family who can get you out on a specific time, not when they're free, but this specific time, or God forbid, Access-a-Ride gets you there. And Access-a-Ride's great for when it's great, but it's tough in other spaces. This has been such a frustration to me to be like, we broke down through community the biggest barrier, like that, like the craziest trails, but that paved road here is impossible, and it's going to completely make someone ineligible for the experience. and not just the experience for the mountains and the trails, but the experience to access inclusion and community in those spaces. One of the things that I've seen, and this is like, to me, this is revolutionary. I didn't know about it before the last maybe 8 to 12 months. But this system of Access-a-Ride that has allowed Uber and Lyft, I think it's $2 rides under 25 miles, something in that regard. If you are eligible for Access-a-Ride, you basically get a free ride through Uber or Lyft. That has been transformational for our adaptive community who don't have their own transportation or are relying on family or friends to take them to our events and to our hikes when they're available. Amazing. I would like to see that program grow. I don't know. I think it's just in Denver, maybe Colorado Springs, and I think it should be available outside of those spaces. And I think the biggest addition to that would be let's remove that 25. I think there's a limit on it. There's some sort of limit, and I understand the limit. You know, you're commuting in your own community, but the reality is recreation is outside of the community oftentimes. So the ability to extend that distance or value for those who are already eligible for Access-a-Ride, I think that would be transformational. There's oftentimes we have some of our adaptive community members who will use their Lyft to get there, and then they have to take Uber back because their mileage is capped, or they're hoping that a family member can pick them up at the end. But you know, this is money that's worth investing. I know it's not cheap. I know it's not free, but what an amazing pilot that I almost feel like our numbers, our service numbers and our opportunities have grown just because this system exists. It's unfortunate when the accessible roads, sidewalks, and et cetera there's still a huge barrier to recreation. So that I would love to see that Uber Lyft Access-a-Ride program grow both regionally to around the state, and I'd like to see that limit expanded, even if it's limited, even if it's once a week, it goes beyond 25 miles. Give people the opportunity to go 30 miles to recreate and do a hike that is made accessible for them once they're there. That's my charge.
I love it, Jeff. Thank you. And Tim, thanks for sharing some of the partners you've got down there. I'm going to bring in Melanie next. Jen Mendenhall, I'm going to give you a heads up that rather than just calling you out to introduce yourself, I'm going to go through our other subcommittee members that have questions, and then I'm going to get you in here with whatever question you'd like to ask. But Melanie, let me go to you for now.
Thanks, Barrick, and thanks everybody. I actually didn't have a chance to introduce myself either at the start. I'm Melanie Mills with Colorado Ski Country USA. We represent 21 Colorado ski areas, and I am listening and learning. And Jeffrey, you are speaking my language. My question is, apropos things like concrete ideas like expand that Uber and Lyft service beyond 25 miles. We've got two of the biggest federal pots of money out there that we have had in a long time in the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. If we get together and make some concrete, specific recommendations, is there money in those pots that we could grab to do something like that, Jeffrey? Because transportation is a topic. Getting to recreation, getting from home to recreation has been a topic we've been talking about since our first meeting. And it's real, it's concrete, it feels like an area where we can really make a difference. And would love to identify how do we put together a proposal to get some of that money?
It's the low-hanging fruit we didn't talk about initially, but it's right there. There's already a program. It just requires more funds. And I know funds are difficult, but this is more important than other subjects. I'm going to say it. I have a bias. It just is. Access is key, and transportation to access is key. So I appreciate that. And I think there is an avenue. I don't know what it is, but I'd love to be a part of it.
Let me pull some of our other panelists in, and GoCo or Wendy at DNR. Your thoughts on whether it's tapping some of these federal pools that are limited time, but they're sitting there, or other funds that we should think about. What's your response to Melanie's question of how do we use those funds and how do we get a transportation issue?
You know, I'd love to hear GoCo's thoughts, but there are so many grant programs out there, like, you know, Connor sitting on the Outdoor Equity Grant Program Board. can we leverage some of those existing grant programs and then focus, you know, on some signature issues like transportation? I mean, it seems like if this is connecting the dots from money to issue, that it might just be more of an awareness effort to connect more of those dots.
Chris or Tila?
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea. We hear often in our conversations people looking for projects that would meet IRA or other federal funding sources. But this one seems like it could have legs. In our space, you know, we intentionally limited how much funding we put towards programs, especially in our local government space, pretty early on in our grant making, because of you know, if we fund outdoor recreation, every outdoor recreation program from ball field, you know, sports programs all across the state would drain our resources really quickly. And so we fund and help partners fund the amenities, and do less on the programming side. And certainly we would think transportation kind of falls within that category, but we're pretty good about trying to find matching resources and other partners that could identify or look for funds to fund what we can't. And so, yeah, I'd love to figure out a way to dig into this to see if there is a way to go after these shorter term federal resources and then look for a longer term solution, whether it's at the state level or federal level.
Ryan, let me get you in on this topic, and then I'm going to bring John Broadbent in with the next question.
Okay, yeah, I just had a few thoughts in our small program at the state parks, but kind of instead of finding additional funding, using the funding that we have, i.e. fleet for some of the vehicles that we're already driving as a state, having accessible vans and things that we can use as state employees to go pick people up or use, because there are already funding sources that we have available to us, and we're all driving state vehicles. Finding a way to adapt our regulatory structure so we can, you know, handle the liability, go pick somebody up who needs to, or allow our volunteer programs to go use those vehicles that we were using on a regular basis to go bring somebody to access to the park. I think that if there's a way to do that, Wendy, you may know there's some regulatory issues there about liabilities and whatnot, but you know, instead of asking for so much more money, maybe we can find the ways to just make some of the vehicles that we have already, you know, accessible and not spend extra money.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. John, let me get you in here.
Yeah, I have to say, first of all, like, such a wonderful discussion that we're having about access and how we can get more people outside. Because you're exactly right, guys. It's really about the first step is getting them there. I speak from experience. I don't drive myself, so whenever I want to go into the mountain, I have to have friends with me to drive me up there. And it is challenging at times to do that. So I fully co-sign with everything that's been said thus far. One thing that I would ask is, aside from what we've discussed about like the first step, what would be, I guess you guys come from such a wide variety of backgrounds. That is a hard question for any one of you to answer. But what is your best guess as to what the biggest impact we can make that we haven't yet talked about? And what I mean by that is, think about like the people who might use the kind of thing that we're proposing what is the most universal idea that you guys have that we're not discussing so far?
So on John's question, I want to get this whole panel in, and I'm not going to limit you to like 20 seconds, but if I can get everybody down to about 60-second pseudo lightning round on John's question of what are we not talking about? And Jeffrey, I'm going to start with you and then go to Ryan.
60-second lightning round. Okay, I would like to see more of our funding at the federal and state level that's used for care to be unlocked for recreation, because it short-term solves a lot of our problems, like transportation. I know there are a lot of agencies that are using the state as an excuse to not allow their care funds to be used for recreation. Oh, the state says we can't go and recreate, and yet another agency will say, absolutely, you can use your care funding for recreation. And I think that's a huge issue. So that's one issue that I would throw onto the table right now, is to figure out creative ways to unlock or to guarantee that care funding can be used not just for cleaning dishes and getting someone out of bed. Because the reality is as caregivers, as an experience, we have to be a little funny with that stuff sometimes, or go through an agency change, which can remove resources for months at a time.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Ryan and then Chris.
Oh, I'm racking my brain here. As far as not talking about things, we've covered a lot of barriers and a lot of financial issues, especially that the large pots of money that are needed to fix these issues. So, I don't know. Can I take a pass?
Absolutely, absolutely. I will call on people that if you want to pass, feel free to. Let me go to Chris and then Wendy.
I'm not gonna, this will be a pass light, I guess, because I just want to reemphasize perhaps what was already brought up. I think in the communities that we work with as a funder, there's a lot of desire to do the right thing. There's a lot of desire to, if they knew it, they could build it. And so it's really, I think, a lot about that creating that connection and that understanding. There's just such a lack of understanding, not necessarily a lack of desire. And so if there was a way to bridge that connection, I think we'd all be the better for it, to create those avenues of communication. And to Tim's point, get all these groups to talk to one another, right? We're all in this for our experiences in the outdoors. Everybody appreciates that. Let's have a broader conversation about that for every project that we participate in.
Thanks, Chris. Wendy and then Topher. Thoughts on something that hasn't been surfaced?
Incentives. I go back to the pot of money at the state. So if even if it's just a little pot of money, if we all know it's out there in case we need to use it to fix a problem, then it's remove the barrier of having to ask for the money. It's there, it's ready to go. So incentivizing just the process.
Thanks, Wendy. Topher and then Tila.
All right, 2 ideas in 60 seconds. Mass transportation. We haven't really talked about that. We're always talking about the lift and like renting a van and stuff. Europe has it down. I can travel alone over there and just go everywhere. We somehow have dropped the ball on like having these speed trains up in I-70 and just connector trains going to Boulder, Denver, et cetera, et cetera. That would be great to get done. Get that, and it helps everybody. It helps the environment, helps traffic, helps everything. And then just to reiterate a point that Michael made, enforcement. We really need to enforce these rules and ideas that we're coming up with, because right now there's a lot of ideas, but there's still like scooters in the middle of the sidewalk, and they're making it hard for us to get around in wheelchairs and low vision people, or people with low vision, et cetera. Yeah, we really need to start enforcing things that we come up with.
Thank you, Topher.
Is that 60 seconds?
It was close enough. I'm giving everyone a little room on this. Tila and then Tim.
So I would look a little bit at some grassroots solutions and looking at uncommon partnerships. I've seen really great things happen in that space. I'm hearing, transportation is a barrier across almost every demographic that I worked with when I was working at the local government level. And so I just wonder, is there a way that all of those groups could come together and create some transportation solutions that, again, are universal for folks? Would love to see that. And Wendy, when you said incentives, I've seen some cool things happen when you give folks $25 gas cards, and that can be a barrier. And again, if you create partnerships and commonalities to, it's a really easy thing where perhaps folks could come together for a low cost solution to address some barriers as well.
Tim, your thoughts?
I think that unfortunately, if we're trying to do something that's like on the more realistic side, that's further from the magic wand solutions that we've talked about so far, a lot of what we do and the problems that we have is not even known about. Many people on here today have talked about there being a lot of people that want to do good things but don't necessarily know how, and I think that that's the case with a lot of these topics. And so bringing like PR viral type energy to solving these type of problems is maybe soul stealing in some perspectives, but also it's how things get done in the world that we live in. And it's not, you don't have to sell your soul necessarily. And so what I'm trying to get at with that is, for instance, like some of the campaigns that we've run in the past that have done well are, closer to something that you would see, from that doesn't have anything to do with the disability space or accessibility or, any of the stuff that would bring us all together on this call right now, but that would bring us together with a much larger group, like an industry, like a ski industry, or like an outdoor industry in some facet. Like we did we did a reoccurring video series with a local Vail resident that broke his neck a couple of years ago, and it's called "I'm a quadriplegic and I do cool shit." And he just said that when I was doing an interview with him, and I was like, that's what the name of the video is now. You just came up with that. And that tracked really well, and people understand that, and then the awareness can grow around something like that to bring the opportunities for the transportation, bring the opportunities for the accessibility and such. And so if we can't get a hold of the funding that's held up by bureaucracy or whatever the case may be, then coming at it with a little bit more capitalistic mindset may pay off for us. And so the answer to the question that you put forth, John, since I didn't get to that, is that if we can go outside of the funding that we already get for all of our programs and whatever, to get campaigns paid for, or awareness campaigns or whatever, and then we point them towards it's not like a PSA that isn't going to get anybody fired up, but is something that is going to be shown in short film festivals or things like this that are going to rally our respective industries around what we're doing. It's a good way to get shit done.
Love it. Jeffrey, I'm going to get you in here quickly. I do want to just name that Carrie flagged to me that Tim shared one of those videos with her. So members of the subcommittee, if you'd like to check that out, drop us a note or we'll circulate that out. But Tim, appreciate that. Jeffrey, what are you thinking now?
I appreciate the extra 60 seconds. I'll borrow it from one of our other panelists. I want to really honor John's question of what have we not talked about today. And one thing that was even mentioned earlier in this meeting was enforcement and what these things look like out on the trail. And let me tell you, most agencies are really wonderful to work with and others are lacking education. And what we run into once in a while is that an agency will group community groups, nonprofits, and commercial outfits into the same category. And one of the problems with this type of grouping is that when we have a limited number of what they would call commercial days, that and they're going to give those days to the most trusted entities, I'm putting quotes out, that just means they've been guiding there for 30 years. That means that the groups that are facilitating cost-free, non-commercial adaptive recreation opportunities can never enter that space without the risk of a ticket for every single person there and violations to regulations for the agency. So XYZ Guiding Service has 50 days in so-and-so park. Because they have that, we don't have room for you, which doesn't mean they don't have room for me. It means they don't have room for the folks who would have that limited mobility. And this is like a huge issue. And the worst part of this is it has nothing to do with the park managers, commissioners, appointed officials, elected officials. It's the interpretation, which we talked about earlier, of that first person on the trail. And they're not attorneys typically. So they both don't understand Colorado legislature or federal legislature and why accessibility and accommodations have to be there. And when these things are all in one bubble, it's usually not a problem until you have a space that says this individual in a wheelchair is competing with a commercial guiding service. And because you're newer than them, we don't have days for you. What also happens is there's this negotiation, which I don't call it a negotiation, but it seems to be a negotiation of, well, you can recreate during the weekdays, but not on the weekends. We're too busy. So we have space for tourism, but not people with diverse abilities. So there's actually like a kind of a legislative issue, in my opinion, that is going to continue to happen. And it's usually what I find in these rare, let's call it 2% of the agencies that we work with, is that we don't resolve it until we go all the way to the park manager or even oftentimes an elected official. And we talk about the injustice of like, why is this for-profit company competing with this individual's opportunity to access the outdoors and community? And it's always resolved. It's 100% resolved by that point, but what a waste of energy. I'm one person and I have to go down that rabbit hole at least once a year, twice, 3 times a year, just to ensure that someone who has said, I would really like to go to this park, has permission to go to that park, which is ridiculous. So, closing statement, John, thank you for asking that. I'm sorry I didn't get it in the first round. It's important though.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And in between your comments and some others, I'm going to come back in a minute to this issue of awareness and education, whether that's the individual working for the state or the local parks or the general public or government. Before I do, Jen Mendenhall, I'm going to give you the chance. I think I saw your hand pop up. I don't know if you're in a place where you're able to jump on screen if you had a question or wanted to introduce yourself. Okay, well, while I wait for Jen to get back, I know she had to go pick up some equipment for her daughter. While I wait for Jen, my question for the panel, and I just want to name, it's 4:10. I should be going to public comment in 5 minutes. I have not received any requests for public comment, which means I'm free to keep talking with all of you and learning from all of you. If you are a member of the public, drop a chat to either myself or Carrie Steele, and we'll get you slotted in here. Otherwise, we're going to continue this conversation. And my final question for this group is, what do people not know enough? And whether that's the general public about these access challenges, whether that's the frontline person on that trail who doesn't know that you can't tell somebody to come back on a weekend, what do government officials not know? We've talked a lot in this group about the power of public awareness and educating people. And that's everything from the economic value add of Coloradans with disabilities and recreation to just educating the general public or those managing our rec facilities. So my question, and Wendy, I'm coming to you first and then to Topher. Who doesn't know and what do they not know that public awareness and education can help with everything from access to the enforcement?
Yeah, I go back to all of our Department of Natural Resources employees. We have 1,700 employees and about 1,200 temporary or seasonal employees. And kind of what keeps me up at night is we can't always train all of them, once a month. And so I think in general, we've gotten kind of good reviews for being aware and for managing issues. But what keeps me up at night is that one employee who doesn't know that Jeffrey then needs to deal with. So what I'm thinking about is how to easily put training into their hands for even the first line temporary employee and our volunteers that are starting out. So work for me to do.
Thank you. Topher, what's something people don't know or understand? And if we educate it and make people more aware, we can start improving access.
Sometimes I feel like I'm on Jeopardy here. Like, what is, but I would say that what most people don't know that they should know is that having a disability or aging, we're all going to be there someday. Every single one of us, doesn't matter what different group you're in, minority, majority, we're all going to be disabled or old. Sorry, that's probably the wrong word. But whatever we accommodate for people with disabilities now, we're actually accommodating for ourselves in the future. And I think we need to just re-stress that over and over and over again. Right now, another thing that I think a lot of people don't know is a lot of people with disabilities, including myself, feel like second-class citizens. We're never accommodated. They'd rather put like a bar outside than put a ramp in. Because it's going to hit more people and not the people with disabilities. So I think we need to get people understanding those 2 points and bring us up to the same level as everybody else.
Thank you, Topher.
You bet.
Tila, what's something that isn't well enough known and who is it not known by?
I think that most folks don't know that ADA is a floor. I think that they think that if you meet those recommendations and guidelines, you're good to go. And don't strive for real universal access. And so back to that idea of, a campaign or further awareness that just because your project is ADA compliant does not actually mean it meets needs.
Love that point. Tim and then Jeffrey. Tim, what's something that someone or some group of folks just don't fully grasp?
Everyone outside of our network or our networks that we have going on our little tiles here, they don't know that quadriplegics do cool shit, or that, everybody that we all deal with, whether it's disability specific or outside of that with minorities or whatever the case may be, our networks don't know, or excuse me, the people outside of our networks don't necessarily know that everybody is doing a lot of cool stuff, and that with the correct opportunities that everybody could be more,
Thanks, Tim. Jeffrey.
I just realized how, well, I'm not as much now, but how purple, there we go, how purple I am. I've kind of got a Thanos thing going on, but I'm not evil, I promise. I appreciate you guys dealing with that and not actually telling me. So the thing that I think, what we don't know about and who doesn't know, I have been running through this, there's so many problems in access and inclusion, right? And the solutions are created through these resources. Sometimes it's an organization, sometimes it's a bill, sometimes it's a community. But the reality is over 7 years and working with some of the biggest adaptive orgs in the state, in the world, who have taught the world how to do their activity, how to adapt it and to make it inclusive. Still, those largest organizations who've taught the world don't know about 50% of what's happening here in Colorado. And if they have dozens of staff who are dedicated to creating a resource and sharing resources, and still 50, I'm throwing a general number out, but it's probably lower. And then if you start to get into family space or what an individual with a disability is aware of. It's a mixed bag, certainly, and certain families and individuals have more exposure to those resource spaces, but it is staggering how, I mean, I've been working in this space for 7 years, and I feel like I know about 5% of the adaptive recreation programs in the state, and that might be being generous. It's probably 5% within 50 miles is the reality. So I don't know what that looks like as a solution, but it is a problem. If you don't know the resources there, how can you utilize it? If I didn't know I could backcountry ski, how would I backcountry ski?
I think it's a great point. And Jeffrey, I will tell you, this group has talked about how do we create a one-stop resource where people can find out about all of these opportunities and what the extent of them is. Let me go to Ryan and then Chris.
I think on the other side of the coin, coming from most of the people that I work with without disabilities, I think what they don't know is the true hardship and what struggle it is for somebody with a disability to get out there. They don't truly have an emotional connection to it. So it's hard to get them to change their mindset about including it in every decision they make, whether it's offering certain permitted days to one group or another, or changing one trail or different. So I think it's more of an education base to those who are just keep a blind eye to it, to kind of get it more into an everyday mindset of this is how I operate. This is, you know, when we're going to think of something we're going to build or think of something new we're going to put in, it's automatically in their head that it's going to be considered, as opposed to an afterthought or meeting some floor requirement like ADA. So.
Thanks, Ryan. Chris, your thoughts on something that people don't know or don't fully understand the extent of?
Yeah, Ryan stole my thunder a little bit there. I think I was going to say we need to humanize these experiences so that, you know, we start to know people outside of our own spheres, get to know them better, get to know their experiences and desires better, and that'll just lead to better outcomes for everybody. And I think I truly believe that if we spent more time in more communities, more diverse communities, we would start to put better projects and programs together. So thanks for stealing that, Ryan. And hopefully it was a good enough piggyback.
That was great. Jen, jump in here, my friend.
I am so sorry. It's been a crazy mommy day. And so I'm going to actually have to go because I need to take care of her business. But I just wanted to say hi, and I'm loving this conversation, and I have connections with all of you from various different places around the state. And I just love, I'm taking notes. And Tim, I've looked at your website. We live in Grand Junction, been wanting to get there. So I just appreciate all of the input. My daughter, Cody, who you've seen zooming around here, maybe I can steal 30 seconds for a couple stories. She skis. We have a adaptive e-trike that both of us ride. We put her feeding tube on the back of it, put her in there, and we ride wherever we want to go. I was telling Jeffrey that we were just actually up in a basin last week, of all places, to try out a new bi-ski that one person can load, because I'm only 4'10" and I cannot help get those bi-skis on the lift. And so we had a connection through Tessier in France that hooked us up with some people in Boulder that had one. And so we met in a basin, and it was an incredible experience. The parking lot was not good, but the skiing and the accessibility of the buildings were incredible. So, you know, we as a family are thankful for all of these conversations, and I apologize, I've been bumping in and out today, but very thankful for all of these conversations and look forward to what comes out of them. So.
Thank you, Jen. My only ask is you not hop off before I give the homework right now.
Okay, let me go take care of her. Are you going to do that? Okay.
I will, and I will follow up with you. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay.
I am going to kind of switch it up for the last 8-9 minutes. I want to get our subcommittee members back in here. And subcommittee members, the homework that I'm going to ask all of you to do is between now and Friday to identify, write down 2 or 3 ideas that came to mind for you from the panel today. Whether that's things like this one-stop resource of all of the opportunities, whether that's expanding some of these programs through Uber and Lyft, or other ideas that you're walking away from here with. But committee members, I also want to use this last 8 minutes. And for the record, we've had nobody request public comment, which is why I'm not calling on it, which means I get to hear from all of you, even better. John Broadbent, I'm going to go to you first and then to Melanie. This is going to be a true lightning round among the subcommittee members. And I'd love to hear from you just what's one thing you're taking away from today's conversation that was new to you?
Well, one thing that I'm taking away is truly important getting to the site in across all groups. Like that's a universal issue that people have no matter what. We've talked about it a lot before, but it's always been within the context of, oh, I have this particular issue with this particular trail, and you know, it the fact that it's so universal is really quite powerful to me. We should definitely and emphasize that in our ultimate recommendation.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you. Let me go to Melanie and then Sharon. Melanie, what's something you weren't thinking about or you're coming out of today thinking differently about after this discussion?
The discussion today has been both lively and exciting, but it also is reinforcing the universality of our transportation challenge. That has to be a part of what we do with our recommendations. And it might be one thing and it might be many things, but I'm going to be brainstorming what are some specific recommendations that we can start to put together as we work on this over the summer, Barrick, because it's such a universal challenge across all the folks who are doing really great things and are excited about what they're offering. And we're making it hard to get people there.
Thank you. I appreciate that emphasis, and we've heard it so many different points. Sharon and then Curtis and then Connor.
Well, thank you everyone for the great conversation and ideas today. And oddly enough, one of the things that stood out to me the most, though, was from Wendy and just talking about paperwork and filing some of this stuff. I don't feel like it would be that hard to have some type of drop-down menu and something as simply as knowing what organizations are receiving money or federal grants that we could look into for accessibility if we knew the programs that were there. And we could apply and see who's actually receiving that money and go straight to them. That would save a lot. And likewise, making it easier for the programs to receive pots of money to take care of some of these adaptive equipment program and access needs would be amazing. Paperwork sucks. It eats up everyone's time.
Thanks, Sharon. Curtis, what's something you're walking away thinking about or reinforced or new?
Well, there are a couple things. First of all, I didn't know anything about Jeffrey's organization today or Tim's. So that central point of contact where, we can find all this information out, I think is huge. And again, re-emphasizing the transportation thing. It's one of those things, if you serve the most needy, it's going to help everybody else, we have transportation in the mountains that's affordable. All those kids, inner city kids, Colorado Springs, Denver, and all that have never been in the mountains also get to go. So thank you all.
Yeah. Connor.
Yeah, thank you. Great panel. Just really amazing just to listen to all this. Obviously, the transportation thing jumps out, and I think there's a lot of different kind of monumental legislation moving around transportation, especially as it relates to train, both up and down the Front Range and into the mountain corridor. And so good for us to be, I want us to be involved in those conversations and making sure that, accessibility on those trains is top of mind, and that's done in a way that brings, this large community, brings them in and really leads with that. A couple other things that jumped out at me. I really like the CARES Act idea, seeing if we could broaden the eligibility or repurpose some of those funds. That's not something I thought of before. And obviously a lot of funding there. So I thought that was a great idea. And then just appreciated and learned from the conversation around enforcement. I think took a lot of notes and a lot of really good points on, even if we're creating policies that, are good policies or well-intentioned, if there's no enforcement of them, then we really haven't made much progress. And as we design policies, we need to design, funding to help with that enforcement piece, because I think we still have a ways to go there. So just great conversation. Huge thank you to, all the great panelists here.
Thank you, Connor. So in the last couple of minutes, subcommittee members, here's my ask of you. While things are still fresh in your mind, would love for you to just write down, however rough, however specific or general, 2 to 4 ideas that are on your mind coming out of today's conversation that you want to put into our summer discussion of, hey, this could be part of the puzzle, one of the pieces to improving access. And if you would shoot those in an email, don't make it fancy, don't make it polished, over to Carrie and me by the end of this week. We want to capture that while that's still fresh on your mind. We will also follow up with all of you about confirming meetings over the summer, some additional times. Panelists, you've heard it from the subcommittee members. Let me extend on behalf of the entire task force and the state that created this, our thanks, first and foremost for the work that you all do every day out in our communities and for your generous time today talking with all of us. I will also ask if you will indulge, we may reach back out to you as we start workshopping ideas, and we would love your input and your help sharing those ideas. But we're grateful for the work that you do and for you helping to inform our conversations. And finally, to the members of this subcommittee, who I feel like every month I'm asking for more time, more generous contribution, thank you. It's truly our honor to support you all as you develop solutions. We've talked about the ADA being the floor, not the ceiling. We've said that it is on us to be the ones that set that aspirational tone. I'm inspired and know that you will help us do that. But more than anything, I'm grateful that you continue to give your time to these conversations. So thank you once again for that today. Thank you, panelists. We will follow up with everyone. Watch for emails if you're a subcommittee member about scheduling. All of our panelists will follow up with all of you as we start floating ideas. We'd love for your help sharing and socializing those so we can make them even stronger. Thank you all, and we will see you again next month.
Thanks, everyone.